If you've ever wondered why the B-17 earned the nickname Flying Fortress, picture a metal porcupine shouldering through daylight, bristling with guns, holding formation while the sky itself tries to tear it apart. By design, B-17s flew straight and tight so their bombardiers could aim with precision and their overlapping machine gun arcs could fend off fighters. That rigidity was both their strength and their curse. Flak could not be dodged, only endured. Crews learned to stare into a wall of black puffs ahead and keep going, praying the next blossom of smoke wouldn't be the one that turned their ship into confetti. American commanders believed discipline, mutual fire, and daylight would beat back the Luftwaffe and put bombs smack on target. In practice, fighter escorts arrived too late in the war for many crews, and German flak rings radar-guided, timed to burst where formations would be, not where they were chewed at aluminum skins, control, cables, and people. You'd watch a fortress slide out of formation trailing smoke, scan for the white flowers of parachutes, and too often count none. And yet, impossibly, these airplanes kept proving how much damage a machine could take and still stagger home. Start with the photograph that looks like a prank of physics. A fortress flying without, essentially, a tail. The bomber was called All-American, and after striking German-held seaports in North Africa, it turned for home across a long span of water. Two Messerschmitts knifed in head-on. Gunners raked the first into fire. The second was hit and drifted out of control. Its wing scythed through All-American's empennage, almost lopping it clean off. The tail gunner suddenly rode in what amounted to a separate airplane, held to the fuselage by scraps of floor and a few tortured strands of metal. From another B-17, a stunned lieutenant snapped a photo that would become legend, a fortress with its tail hanging like a broken door, still somehow steady in the air. Why didn't it simply tumble and die? A small mechanical mercy. The autopilot happened to be engaged at the instant of impact, and electrical servos still whispered to the crippled control surfaces even though most of the mechanical cables were severed. Engines stuttered. The horizontal stabilizer on one side was gone. Fabric and metal flapped like torn sails. The rudder was a mangled flag. The formation throttled back, shepherding the wounded ship as the pilots coaxed, it level, then lower, then home, the tail swaying like a pendulum that refused to let go. All-American landed. No one died. The airplane was repaired and sent back into the fight, as if that were an ordinary sentence and not a small miracle. Then there are the men who fell, literally, and lived. The ball turret was the most claustrophobic job on a B-17, one small swiveling globe on the belly, barely wide enough for a wiry gunner and his twin 50s. Parachutes didn't fit inside. You stowed yours in the fuselage and hoped you had time to climb back in if the worst came. Over St. Nazaire, a young ball turret gunner in an airplane with a cereal box nickname Snap, Crackle, Pop got the worst in a hurry. Flak took an engine, then shredded a wing. He cranked the turret to the crawl-through position and squeezed back into the fuselage, only to find his parachute reduced to ribbons by shrapnel. Another hit blew the bomber apart and blew him out too, at high altitude, without a chute, without oxygen, and without consciousness. By any reasonable math, he was gone. And yet a train station's glass roof broke his fall like a stack of fragile trampolines, each panel shattering, each one stealing a little more speed. He slammed into the floor, battered, broken, alive. German soldiers, incredulous, sent him to a hospital. A tail gunner named Eugene learned a different grim truth. Sometimes the smartest thing is to stop fighting what you cannot change. Over Bremen, fighters and flak mangled his bomber and blew away his parachute. Another blast took the whole tail section off the airplane, and with it the tail gunner suddenly free of the fuselage, falling inside a spinning drum of metal. He tried to brace, then chose to relax, to soften for the impact he was sure would kill him. The tail met a pine, the branches ripping energy from the descent in a punishing but survivable cascade. German soldiers found him, barely clinging to life. A prisoner doctor, himself captive, worked with scraps and stubbornness to keep the airman alive through the long winter of imprisonment. A gunner on a ship called Skippy met a similar fate over Greece when two fortresses collided in clouds. He fell in the severed tail, too, survived the crash into trees, and stumbled out to see he was alone, the rest of his airplane missing from the world. Orthodox monks took him in. When people tell you war is chaos, that's the sort of thing they mean. Even for those who managed to bail out, escape wasn't simple. You had to find a hatch in a swaying, burning, shrieking metal hallway while wearing a heavy suit, an oxygen mask, and boots. You had to remain conscious when the slipstream grabbed you and smashed you against the skin of your own airplane. You had to clear the tail. You had to land among people who might be friendly or not, in a country that might welcome you or deliver you to a camp. The odds were never generous. And yet the B-17 kept offering up proof that when you combine human stubbornness with a rugged airframe, you can sometimes cheat physics twice in one day. Consider an airplane named Lovely Julie over Cologne, when flak did what flak is designed to do. It detonated exactly where it needed to, right in front of the nose. The plexiglass fell away. The framework vanished. The instrument panel became shrapnel. A man in the nose died instantaneously, his body absorbing shards that would have killed the pilots, and the blast left the cockpit an open convertible at a murderous altitude. Wind clawing, oxygen lines torn, Gaugus gone. The pilot shoved the ship downward, trading thin air for thick breath and survival for exposure. With the maps and the compass gone, the navigator became a human sextant, reading landscape and gut to sketch a line home across a country intent on erasing him. The crew worked in a howl of cold wind, eyes watering, skin burning, convinced that at some point the dying would catch up. It didn't. They limped across enemy lines and water and found their field. The pilot landed without flaps, without brakes, without a front to his airplane, and parked a story people would not believe if there weren't witnesses and wreckage to swear to it. These are not isolated freak accidents. They are part of a tapestry woven from risk, design, and the cruel arithmetic of daylight bombing. The fortress's metal bones, spars, and trusses built to carry a bomb load far into enemy country also kept flying when skin was peeled away and the airplane was more whole than hull. The distributed control of multiple engines gave pilots levers to pull when 1, 2, even 3 were dead weight. Redundant systems whispered life to surfaces even when cables were cut. And always, wrapped around those advantages, were men who learned to keep a crippled ship balanced on the head of a pin, to count seconds of oxygen and miles to the sea, to decide when to fight and when, incredibly, to go limp and trust a pine to catch them. It is tempting, reading these accounts, to turn them into myths, to paint the fortress as invincible and the crews as superhuman. The truth is thornier and more human. The B-17 was tough, yes, but thousands didn't make it back. The men were brave, yes, but they were also afraid and cold and young and sometimes just lucky. Fighter cover grew better as long-range escorts arrived and losses eased, but flak never learned to care how many Mustangs circled above. It was a math problem with a fuse, and it went on solving itself until the war ended. So what do you do with stories like a tail hanging by threads that won't snap, a boy falling through a glass roof and standing up again in another life, a cockpit torn away, and a pilot steering the wind? You file them next to the photographs in which fortresses are missing chunks that should have killed them, next to the terse mission reports that say, landed with heavy damage, next to the crew portraits where half the faces would not survive the tour. You remember that men looked into that wall of black flowers and kept flying straight because their doctrine, their training, and the airplane under their boots demanded it. And you let the impossible be what it is, not proof that war is noble, but proof that in the worst engineered chaos humans have ever built, some things hold together anyway.